think. Yeah, we're on now. We are on now. So, not legal advice and Mr. Kurtis. Great to have you here tonight. I really appreciate everything you've done for the MMTLP crowd. I'm always amazed, really. I listen to people, and the intellect and the amazing brain power of all these people is really incredible. You in particular, amongst the crowd with Junk Savvy and all those people, and we're just talking about Edward and all those that crowd. It's really impressive and appreciated. I'm sure everybody who's in the MMTLP crowd really appreciates that. So I wanted to thank you for all your efforts, and wanted to say hello, and you could say hello to the people.
Yes. Well, thank you. That's very flattering. And it pales in comparison with what you've done. I would be able to maybe put out one legal filing, especially with my tendency to sit on things a little bit. But I'm honestly flattered. It's not something that we chose to participate in, right? So we're all here kind of against our will. But everybody's got their own skill set, their own talent set that I think we've been able to kind of come together as a community and figure out how to utilize those skills and talents to the best of the ability. But good to be here with you tonight.
Okay, so I have to do the cautionary thing. Not legal advice. It's not advice of any sort. We're just talking. Hopefully we have some familiarity with the subject matter, and so hopefully it will be productive. We're going to obviously get into MMTLP in depth, and in particular, we'll get into the most recent press release that Nextbridge sent out. And we're going to we'll get to that as we'll do a little foreplay first, but we'll eventually get to that. I usually start off with a little bit of attempted humor. I'll try it. I don't know, Kurtis, do you have a stepladder?
I do.
Okay, I have a stepladder too. I never met my real ladder. I knew this guy. He admitted to being addicted to brake fluid, but he said he could stop anytime he wanted. And last but not least, tomorrow I learned how to speak in the future tense. I have some other ones that we will get to as we go on. If anything you want to put out now, go for it.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, it's really hard to one up your humor level, but I'll throw a FINRA SEC joke in there. So just to start off with the theme. So why can't you trust FINRA, the SEC, or stairs?
Well, FINRA and the SEC are scumbags. I don't know about the stairs.
It's true, but it's because they're always up to something.
There you go. Very nice.
There we go.
Very nice. Very nice. I appreciate that. So how did you get involved in investing? So, you're in this situation now. How did you get here?
Yeah. So I was actually a Torchlight investor, not for Torchlight. I started investing in Torchlight and MMATF in anticipation of the approval and ultimate reverse takeover that was going to take place between Metamaterials Inc., which was not trading on a major exchange within the United States. And obviously they were going to merge with Torchlight, kind of an uplisting reverse takeover.
I'm going to interrupt you at times, just kind of.
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Was that the first investment you ever made in your life?
No, I've been investing since I was 18. So I'm a tenured investor. But,
okay. So what about this particular investment caught your attention?
So it was a more of a speculative growth play for me. I'm admittedly a technology nerd, and Metamaterials there are defense companies and stocks that trade on major exchanges, but not any that specialize in specifically Metamaterials. And I was actually at a conference back in 2016 and got to talk to one of the speakers was Dr. Michio Kaku. He's a pretty famous physicist and futurist. And he was breaking down. Have you seen some of his videos?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic speaker. And he was actually breaking down kind of what the next 10 years look like. And that was, again, in 2016. And one of the more interesting pieces was when he was referencing some of the nanotechnologies that are coming to fruition, and what they'll do or what they will enable, specifically within semiconductors and some of the things that can be. Everyone likes to use the invisibility cloak from Harry Potter as the wow factor, but I got to talk to him afterwards, and I had questions. It was a finance based conference, and there weren't any stocks that were not defense contractors that had any kind of relevancy to metamaterials technology. So anyway, when that opportunity looked like it was going to come to fruition with metamaterials uplisting, I started acquiring shares.
So I'm going to jump in again. So I recall you were also in Tesla at some point in time.
Oh yes.
Did your experience in Tesla, did Tesla lead you to metamaterials?
In a way, yes, because in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, they actually shared within lease space. There was a small little shop actually where Jeff Don, who is known as the godfather of lithium-ion batteries, and really pioneered a lot of the lithium-ion battery technologies that are used within the electric vehicle space. They literally they were adjacent in a building. There's a little space rented out there in Nova Scotia, and it looked very interesting, some of the parallels that they had in potential partnerships.
Yeah, so, I remember because I was in MMAT also. I remember probably like a couple of years ago, and there were a lot of rumors going on about potential business relationship between Tesla and MMAT. I remember at that time.
Yeah. Oh yes, yeah. So I started acquiring shares in February. They started running up significantly with from Torchlight, because they're well, now it's well documented, right? There's some social media pumpers that were out there, the Atlas Trading Group that got a hold of. So I remember that very well, as additional attention came on in the kind of 10 days after I started initially investing. So
I'm going to stop you again. Did you know anything about shorting at that time?
Oh,
did you know did you know the prevalence of shorting in the market, or naked shorting in the market?
I will say I was not privy to the extent of synthetic, naked, counterfeit shorts that existed. But yeah, I've shorted stocks before. I was not aware of the strategy behind it. I'll say
you weren't short MMTLP now. You're not going to come clean on that, right?
I certainly was not.
Okay. That would be quite an admission. I probably should have asked you that beforehand.
Yeah, that would have been a prep question.
Yes. But anyway, so you got in. You were accumulating shares, and it was going up.
Yeah. So eventually, after May, it was greenlit, and essentially the RTO was approved, and I was interested in what the oil and gas assets were. I will fully admit I didn't do a significant amount of due diligence. I just knew I was going to keep a percentage of my position because it could be lucrative. It could not be. Obviously, I was anticipating, like every other Torchlight investor, some of which have been invested for years and years. I was anticipating that preferred share that was going to be really reserved for Torchlight investors. The terms of the merger were set up to be if you had TRCH, which was NASDAQ listed, if you were a Torchlight investor, you would get access to the company, but you would retain the preferred shares, which really gave you access to the oil and gas assets. In preferred share, it was unquantifiable, a non-quantifiable, intangible asset at the time, but in the prospectus and all the proxies, they were either going to sell the assets by December or potentially spin it out. And obviously we know what resulted, but I ended up retaining a majority of that position through the merger, and I rode the roller coaster back down.
So I'm going to take you now. I'm going to I'm going to move you ahead. When did you start taking note? So prior to the U3 halt, when was the first time you started taking note of what was going on at that time?
Yeah. So, anyone that was involved in this probably remembers this like it was yesterday, even though it was June of 2021. But the share price went up. After the adjusted numbers for it look like the chart. This is now the MMAT chart, was the Torchlight chart. Went up over $21, and it was at $3. It has a huge spike, and it started. Shorts were still piling in, and it's well known and well documented that Torchlight was one of the shortest, or one of the heaviest accumulated short positions on the NASDAQ, and it makes sense.
Is that something that you learned after the fact?
No, I knew it beforehand, and that's why that was part of the motivation for them seeking an outlet to really allow metamaterials to uplist for the reverse takeover. So I was definitely aware of that, of the short interest, and I rode that roller coaster in February of 2021. But it wasn't a huge position for me personally, so I wasn't worried about it. It was extremely volatile up until the point of really started picking up momentum in May, June. The merger closed early, unexpectedly, just a couple days earlier than anticipated. And it was, mind you, this is 2021.
Right.
We're in the height of the meme stock,
right,
in social media frenzy. So George Palikaris was very active on social media, and it was kind of just fun to watch it all play out. But the share price, once the ticker changed, once the actual company has now moved and it's effectively Metamaterials Inc., they shorted it nonstop. And what I did not realize, there's always the adversaries of any company, right? The believers and the non-believers, but I did not realize the extent because I've never personally invested in a meme stock beforehand. I didn't realize the short and distort players and the whole social media aspect of investing. It was like a toxic waste pool on whether it be Twitter or stock twits.
When did you first start noticing that the MMs were being attacked?
Yeah, I created a stock twits account.
Okay.
And that was in probably June. So immediately preceding the finalization of the RTO, and it was it was interesting to say the least. And then I was like, I need to remove every connection to my personal identity at this point. People are crazy going on here, but it's
any of those, by the way, any of those people that were posting, any of those same people that are posting now, that you know of?
It's very funny that you asked, because yes, they are. They absolutely are. They're still interested parties, which is very strange because that merger closed nearly 3 years ago. That's weird.
So what interest could they have now?
I don't know. I'm sure they closed their positions back in June 2021. So
right.
They probably have that sarcasm for anyone that's not picking up on that. So
yes.
Yeah. So I think, part of the interest.
I guess to be clear, as if they were out, then maybe they're not out. Maybe they're holding some kind of short position, or they're protecting a short position, or affiliated with a short position. We don't know, but it sounds suspect.
It sounds pretty. There have been some really good trades and some really bad trades of some companies I've invested in over the years. And what I've never done is gone back and visited their Twitter investor community or their stock twits boards. That, again, they're cesspools no matter what.
Yeah.
I've never spent my personal time doing that, but there seems to be a contingent of people that spend all of their time doing that. So
yeah, I think it's interesting because they're either in my view, they're either one of two things. Either they're the biggest disgusting group of people of all time because they enjoy people's misery, and that's gets their jollies, or they're being paid to do that. Those are the two things that alternatives of kind of come to me. I don't know which one it is. They're both bad. And in fact, being a miserable human being might even be worse than being paid to be a shill.
Yeah, there's probably a third option in there, and that
Okay.
is a person with an admittedly large short position that was expecting to be able to close that position and could not. So,
Yeah.
which I think spins into the MMTLP story to begin with. So,
Right. So you're through 2021. So it kind of you're just kind of tooling through 2021. Does that bring us like till, December of 2022 is that literally what happens? You kind of follow it, but there's nothing earth shattering that happens until we get near the end?
yeah. So, I was not a fan of all of the social media activity around MMTLP because my investment was probably, I don't know, 10 to 1, 20 to 1 MMAT to MMTLP.
Right.
And I was a fan of the technology applications. I recognized the growth potential in the company, but all this attention that was placed on MMTLP at the time, which was, it garnered respect and attention, but I felt personally at the time that it was kind of sucking the attention away from some of the developments that were happening from the parent company, from the issuer, Metamaterials Inc. So I didn't talk about it publicly. I had my shares. I was going to be a beneficiary of the outcome, but it was kind of something I just put out of my mind. Set in my portfolio. I wasn't going to touch it. It didn't have a value since the end of June, and we really didn't get our shares distributed. Doesn't matter which brokers you use until July of 2021, but they sat there with just an identifier, and until, of course, October 6th, 2021. And then I started looking, and I'm going, okay, wait a minute. And there's a chart that is appearing the next day. And I was one of the social media, whatever, people that are visible and present, and that were sharing information. I went through and I bought a couple shares. I bought them at 10 cents, 30 cents, which is crazy when you look back at it. But and they went through, and I'm recording the routing information, and I'm like, who's listing these? Like, this doesn't make any sense. The company's not announcing anything. There's not a corporate action. And yeah, so then at that point in October of 2021, I start digging.
Which is your nature, I presume?
It is. Yeah. I like, I do like going down some rabbit holes. That's how I discovered metamaterials to begin with. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun when you don't have your livelihood on the line. Right. But yeah, it was interesting to see what it was, and the company wasn't acknowledging it. So that was kind of the first start of my involvement with MMTLP.
And I'm going to take you to, December of 2022. We'll get there. But so you were an investor in MMAT also, and that really was your my words. That really was your central interest because the technology really appealed to you.
Yeah.
And am I correct? That's really struggled too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Struggled is an understatement for sure.
Management. I mean, I had my own concerns about management. I guess they had a toxic lender, apparently. We've learned about that, unfortunately, as time goes on, that when you have a bad lender who ends up shorting you, it can destroy the stock, and sometimes no way of getting back. But
yeah.
So you followed MMAT, and what's your read on MMAT and kind of how it went south?
In a bad place, obviously, right now. So it had in right around Labor Day of 2021. So it rode all the way down to something closer to what a reasonable valuation would have been. It was not a multi-billion-dollar company from a market cap standpoint with what they had. Maybe future state, but certainly not what they had. It wasn't a pre-revenue company, but it was a limited revenue growth, emerging growth company. So, but they really built up momentum right around Labor Day of 2021. And yeah, I think, the technology applications and the development headquarters, the staffing, all of that, and from from what you can see on the partnerships, all of that was very encouraging. So you have, it's almost a tale of two tales, right? You have the stock performance, which is terrible, and it has been really terrible historically since it's uplisted to the NASDAQ. If you were an original investor like myself, you had to average down or you're in a bad position. And the company developments alternatively dramatically different. So there are no mass producing metamaterials companies that exist. And so they have to kind of create the processes that exist. And so, yeah, there's a lot of upfront costs, like any growth company. There's a lot of upfront costs, but the potential and the partnerships and the due diligence part of that company and some of the exciting potential is what I had fun doing and sharing with a lot of the fellow investors on social media. So that was my pull. I didn't talk about MMTLP until, when you want to fast forward to December 2022, or really right up preceding the spin out.
Yeah, I'm hoping for all the MMAT investors that, despite the reverse split, and the one thing I've learned is that's like a curse word, reverse split, because generally it doesn't help the shareholders, the existing shareholders. I think it helps the existing CEO, keeps the company alive, but the shareholders kind of get diluted beyond recognition. Yeah. And then it permits the shorts to come in and reshort, for basically cut it down. And I know, since I'm watching MMAT, I know when they did this reverse split, it went up to about 550 approximately, something like that. Yep. And it went down to the twos, and then now I think on Friday it had a really good day, so it's back in the middle threes, somewhere in there. But it's hard to tell who or what is causing it to rise. Sometimes I think, like in those situations, that you're just getting short covering, and the heavy short interest you have, they cover it $2.50. It drives the price of the stock up, and then they'll reshort it again at 3.5. Yeah, I don't know that, but that's kind of what my suspicions are as I've seen all these companies get shorted. I saw some stat today. I think it was talking about NASDAQ. I think NASDAQ companies, and it said, I don't remember, it was 2021 or 2022. There were 71 NASDAQ, I think it was NASDAQ companies that had a stock price under 1. Wow. And in 2024, it was 551. And I think that's directly reflective of shorting being out of control and it diluting the value of, a litany of stocks, not just ours, across the board.
Yeah, it used to be. So yeah, it used to be a little taboo to hit the major exchanges, right? So OTC, it has always run rampant. Less governance, less oversight. It makes sense, but it bleeding into the major exchanges like the NASDAQ and NYSE, it's and major companies, right? So Tesla is maybe the most well documented example of it. It's rare that you have a company that can survive it, right, long term. So
does it make you consider investing in a different way?
I absolutely have changed my investment strategies because of that, and part of it is not investing within the marketplace. So which is honestly should be, for our regulators, the number one concern. They like to pump the narrative of liquidity, right? But liquidity doesn't matter if people aren't putting in, their hard-earned money. So, and who would? That's a whole nother dynamic where you could go with that conversation. But yeah, it absolutely has changed my personal investment strategies, and I pay a lot more close attention to the index funds that I invest in from within my 401k, within my IRA. So yeah, it's scary.
Yes, and I was going to say, especially in the recent admission by, and we suspected it, but the recent admission by Finra that they really don't know what's going on outside. Once some stock, a security leaves the United States, they have no idea. They don't track it. They don't count it. They don't tell us that there's extra dilution in the market. They don't tell us that we can't really tell you what the value of your security is because we don't really know how many shares there are. All that stuff, that really was disputed up until last week. And when I saw that, besides the fact I thought it was unbelievable and we kind of talked about a little bit about this before we started. I think it's unbelievable that Finra put out the FAQs because I think it just created more problems than anything else for them. I don't think it solved anything. I think it just suggested, basically, if you got nothing to hide, you don't need to address any of this. Yeah. You only need to address it if you got a problem here. But they haven't addressed it, obviously, beyond that. But their admission about not being able to not knowing really what the valuation or share count is, to me, suggests they should require that all the brokers put warning on all the account documents saying, to the effect, we have no idea what we're selling you. We don't have any idea of value, and we have no idea of dilution. So you're on it on your own. And that's basically, if you look at it, that's almost the position that the regulators have taken. It's, buyer beware, your OTC, screw you, kind of take, go follow it. So I find that really incredible. I don't know how do you your take on that?
Honestly, I was appalled when they released the first FAQ. We were getting ghosted with all of the independent outreach efforts that we had to Finra. And it was almost, we're approaching 100 days of non-responsiveness since the December 9th U3 halt. And they decided to release that. And I'm sure that didn't come out on a whim, right? I'm sure, as you well know, I'm not sure how many attorneys touched that before they decided on what the language was. And I'll never forget. It wasn't, by the way, I want to clear up a misconception. It wasn't solely me working on that. It was a small group of people that are amazing that do this work behind the scenes, right? And we all kind of came together. And it was really Mr. Gandalf and I, me binging on Red Bull and like Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies, and just pumping out piece by piece and rebuttals, and then having to verify every single one of the details and what we thought before, I will say, probably put forth equal effort, if not more effort than what Finra did to create the initial FAQs. But it was just truly disingenuous. But I was surprised that they would put themselves in a circumstance where they were issuing an official language. And actually, when they did that, and then we responded to that official FAQ, and obviously it blew up, and thank you for everybody for the attention and resharing all of that. Literally days later, I think 3 days later, they issued an amended version of that FAQ. And then, of course, we heard nothing between March, through November this year. So, and then very interesting. I included this from within the supplemental FAQ response, but if you look at the investor insight section of Finra's portal, which is where they're posting these FAQs, it's supposed to be helpful information, and it's largely geared towards retail investors. Zero instances of another ticker being referenced at all, especially something like geared specifically towards one particular ticker. And it happens to be one that has not traded since December 9th. Very interesting.
I had heard, and I don't think maybe I told JR. So I'd heard about March. So about the time of the first FAQ that the SEC was super pissed at Finra at the way they had managed the proceedings.
Yeah.
And so my speculation was it was really the SEC telling Finra, you got to put something out just to shut everybody up. And that's why they did it. Because otherwise, strategically, it's a bad move.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to capitulate. If they decided, yeah, we looked at it, and after considering it, we decided we're going to resolve this. Okay, that makes sense. But if you tell everybody to take a hike and we have no responsibility, and you got to do it repeat it 3 or 4 times, that's just not a good look. And that suggested to me that somebody might have prompted them.
And that would hold true today with the responses to Congress as well, right? So
yeah. Unfortunately, so one thing I asked you to do, and we're gonna take off from December, but we'll get there a different direction. One thing I wanted to do is, and part of the difficulty I think in this whole episode we're in, it's so complex that if you're not in it and somebody tries to explain it to you, your eyes gloss over and you don't understand it, and you think the person that's telling you is an imbecile or out of their mind. Because to be honest, before I got involved in the market, especially these securities, I had no idea of the extent of the nonsense that was going on. So, I didn't. So one thing I asked you, there's not a lot of pressure, by the way, but I said, see if you could do like a 1-minute summary of the MMTLP problem. And I thought that, people listening, or if they're going to describe it to somebody else, it'd be really helpful if when you're describing it to somebody else, if you try to keep it short and sweet. And if they want more detail, you can offer them as much detail as possible, but you want them to kind of understand basically what's going on. So Kurtis, it's all you, and you're on the clock, by the way.
Yeah, and I'll take part of my 60 seconds to say I'm the worst person, and everyone knows this, at being concise. So
that's why I asked you, by the way.
But short version is emerging growth next gen technology company, reverse takeover merger onto the NASDAQ with an oil and gas exploration company, Torchlight Energy Resources. Torchlight investors get a preferred share dividend that's exclusive for them. They have rights to it. It's not to be tradable, not meant to be tradable by the company. Fast forward, the non-tradable preferred share becomes tradable within the same year. Trades on the open marketplace on the OTC, even though this was originally a NASDAQ asset, and ultimately was going to spin out into a privately held oil and gas company, Nextbridge Hydrocarbons. All of the SEC approvals necessary were granted, and Finra appears to have set up, colluding with several parties, to prevent the trading and execution of this spinout, to where the last 2 days of trading, where the assumption was that the open short positions that would be closed and not carry over into the private company would be forced closed, and Finra robbed investors of all sorts from their chance to divest out of that solution, and are still dealing with issues receiving genuine Nextbridge hydrocarbon shares to this day.
Thank you. I think it was slightly over a minute, but that was great. That was a great stepping off point. We're going to go back to that, but I kind of wanted to go on a little different topic. So Super Bowl's tomorrow. I'm sure everybody, or at least a lot of the people that are watching us now, are either going to watch the Super Bowl or listen to it or go. So who do you pick and why?
I'm a sports fanatic. I think the 49ers definitely have the more talented roster on paper, but it's hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes. Honestly, I think he's the I'm not a Patriots fan at all, so this cringes me to say it, but I think he's the next Tom Brady. They're perennial contenders every single year. They're in the AFC Championship every single year. It's hard to pick against them. Biggest moment under the bright lights, I think experience pays dividends. No pun intended. And I think the Chiefs win in a close one.
Okay, so mine is, I thought Mahomes is basically the equivalent of a Brady type character. Those guys don't lose in championships. They don't. Now they might. It's not like they can't, but generally those guys do well. Michael Jordan did well. Those kind of premium players end up either they do or they don't. It's one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because if they don't, that's a problem. That may be like their whole career. But I agree with you. Also, I think historically speaking, Reed has more success at higher level games than Shanahan.
Yeah.
And I agree also. I think that the 49ers have a better roster overall. But we shall see. Hopefully the game will be good. Other stocks you follow. You mentioned you're a trader currently. Other stocks that you're either in or following.
Tesla, which is always a fun ride, right? I follow Tesla as much as an investor as just for personal interest. I love the EV movement. I kind of admire as a leader some of the things that Elon Musk stands for. Fortunately, one of the tools that we have access to through Twitter, now X, has been Twitter Spaces. And full acknowledgement, they existed before he took over. But I do admire and I like watching the private ventures as well. SpaceX. Apparently, you should be able to short SpaceX, right? Because it is you can hold shorts in a private company now. Yeah. I think that would be a smart investment.
I already did.
SpaceX.
I already did.
Okay. Send the market mechanics for how to do that after we wrap up.
We'll do. I'll post it on X.
Awesome.
Do you own any of the other I own GTII. Do you own any of those type of stocks?
I have no, I don't have any GTII. I don't have Finger. I have a small position in GNS just to show support. I took a position in BBIG also to show support. That's a sunk cost at this point. I don't think there's any resuscitation there, but I hope so. I hope that was really, it's ironic, the parallels from the board perspective with what we're seeing play out in MMAT with what happened with BBIG. So very toxic.
Yeah. GTII, that's Alpine. So I happen to follow that one. Somebody asked me about it, so I said I'd briefly address it. The big thing about the Alpine, and there's another case, is that the Supreme Court is looking at the power and authority of the regulators and SROs. And Alpine is in an appellate case arguing about that. And, we would like, if it wasn't Alpine, we would like them to win. But we don't like Alpine because literally they're the poster child for the most disgusting group, period. That is the most disgusting investment group, period. If you go look at their historically what they've done. So that last week there was a hearing on an appeal, and we'll see whether they win or lose. Hopefully they'll lose and get out. A lot of people think, and this is kind of in the short game, a lot of people think that when the prime brokers are attacked or put out of business, that is an impetus for getting the stock to run. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But a lot of people, for GTI, for example, Alpine was the prime broker that was illegal, we think, illegally shorting the company. So people think that if you get rid of Alpine, that will cause the stock to move. And Alpine's been evading the expulsion for quite some time. Just a matter of time. But anyway, it's interesting because I think they're the bottom of the barrel. And the problem is the regulators still have elected not to take them out.
Yeah.
And that's really shocking. And in the hearing, I thought this was amazing. There's like tens of thousands of brokers. We could see the misconduct, and I can see the misconduct in New York in my office in LA.
Yeah.
And there was like a dozen actions pending against brokers in all of Finra against disciplining brokers. And there again, theoretically, they're protecting retail and everybody. So yeah, in quotation marks. So pretty disgusting. So one of the things I asked you about was from a sociological view, going through the MMLT thing, whatever it is, what's kind of the thing that struck you the most? And also I asked you about kind of group dynamics, because there's a community, and it's interesting going through it. And I don't think it's existed before. So kind of what's your, views on all that?
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. I'm not much for, I literally loathed Twitter before. Honestly, I used it for news updates, and it is by far, I mean, it's a brilliant platform for quick dissemination of news, right? I think everybody has fully utilized that, but for interacting with people or quality of interactions, it's not served me well in my life since I think I've had Twitter since 2011. But the community dynamics are interesting. So I got my first fan page today. That was interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I have I don't know what you call it. It's like a swim fan page.
Actually, somebody asked me to ask you about that, about your fandom and your new, I don't know, the fake Kurtis accounts.
Yeah.
You're very popular. You should take that as a positive. When I get omitted, I take that as an insult. So, like, even there was some guy yesterday who accused a bunch of people of being pumpers.
Yeah.
It was like 20 people. I was excluded. I was pissed, honestly.
That's a badge of honor when you get to wear that, the pumper badge.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, that's not me. That's my face. Obviously you can see I am a real person, but that's not my body. There's not that much body hair on my body. So I don't know who did that. It's probably, I think I know who did it, but it's funny. I find humor in it, but the social dynamics are interesting. Again, there's no, did you know there's no HR on Twitter? You can have an investor community, could be very well organized, but there is no human resources department for your investor community. So I've felt compelled to do that at times and mediate, which I never try explaining that to your family and friends as you're mediating from people that you don't really know.
Right.
Over an investor community disagreement. It's wild, but honestly, so the group dynamics are always interesting. No different than what I've experienced in my career, but you always have some level of dissension, different ideas, different approaches to things. I think what I've seen, because I have been a part of investor communities before and just sharing information, but I think one of the things that is fantastic about the MMTLP community is through inevitable drama and just the realities of group dynamics. I think the organization and everybody kind of pulling each other up. And this was it's still an ongoing, obviously, traumatic scenario where a lot of people had significant investment. I have significant investment in it, but it's not my lifeline. I'm not dependent on it, but for many people they were, and they lost hope,
right.
And had their assets frozen. So it has served as a means of therapy for a lot of people. And I don't think there are other, obviously, investor communities that use and utilize Twitter Spaces and Reddit and Facebook and whatever, all these different platforms, stock specific platforms like Investor Hub or StockTwits. I'm over those, but it is the first instance that I've seen of somebody literally from the moment of the halt, and it actually started prior to the halt, in anticipation of the spin out completing, every day, literally every day, 24 hours a day, there's an MMTLP space that's open. And for a long time, that was based solely for information sharing. But over time, obviously, everyone's gotten to know each other over the last 14 plus months. And there are music spaces, there are just hangouts, right? Because these are all people that are sharing a traumatic experience together. So we have more in common. Obviously, we all come from different backgrounds. Everyone is different and unique, but we all have this one commonality, and that part is pretty cool. And the community is largely supportive of each other. Of course, there's some people that don't get along, but I think for the most part, it's been a fantastic experience. And I would never have met some, like Richard, you and I would have never met otherwise.
No.
Likely, hopefully not. Hopefully not under bad circumstances where
right. You might have been a defendant. You might have been a defendant somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but you're right. I thought about that too. All as we were going through it, I thought, this is basically a big community, a lot of people. You're going to have diverse views. You're going to have some friction. That's just normal. But on the flip side, the amount of information, the amount of action that came out of like Don, still Don Rich, whatever his name is, even though I've spoken to him, I still get confused about his name, and everybody, including yourself, doing all the analysis and digging, ultimately what it came down to me is, why has no group before been successful in getting anything done? Because it's almost an impossible task. You need such a group effort to stay together, and to stay together for over a year, despite the adversity, despite I heard the same stuff, people dying, people having marriages break up, the financial stress. That's really powerful stuff, and it causes people to do things they normally wouldn't do. So I was really impressed, and still am, that the group has stayed together, and notwithstanding my feelings about any particular member or whatever view, I am super impressed and grateful for everybody who's either hosted the spaces or kept the spaces going, participated, because again, if that would have died, that would have been the death to in my mind, that would have been a death to the movement. It really kept the movement alive. There's a lot of action that happened outside of that, but that was kind of like the core. And like you said, it was therapy for a lot of people. They can go in, express themselves to a like group that could identify with what they were going through. And it might have saved people, it might have literally saved some people's lives, because they may not have had a way of dealing with it. Because, for a lot of people, and I know this is kind of going to sound like a bizarro comparison, my parents were Holocaust survivors. So when the Holocaust survivors came to the US or wherever they went, they did not get therapy because they never felt comfortable enough with anybody they could deal with that could identify with what they went through. Right. So there's a thing about having a commonality with somebody else that lets you express something that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to express, lets you get rid of that anger, anguish, whatever. So I am grateful for the spaces, notwithstanding the fact that I think you may have done it too. I'll let you address it, but I go in and out. It's an intense place. And I don't think for myself, it's not productive to be there 100% of the time. So I kind of go in and out, and I try to add whatever I can and depart. So I don't know what your view is on that.
Yeah, I think for me, the participation rate is relevant to, it directly correlates with the information flow, right? If there's news, whether I have news or whether there's news where throughout my workday, I wasn't able to hear what was going on. We have fantastic people that make it kind of their life's work right now to just dedicate themselves to the space, make sure that all the information is organized and then, shared throughout the community. So I'm in meetings all day, every day at work. And so it's really hard for me to join a space unless I have a small break in between, and I'll multitask and I'll listen in. But I'm in Zoom meetings and Teams meetings. How would you ever coordinate without a platform like Twitter Spaces with people that you don't know? You don't know their email addresses. You don't know who they are. You can't identify. That's the beauty of Twitter Spaces. Is it is really the town hall open space where you can open up anything to talk about, and it's an open door policy, right?
Right.
Assuming no one has anyone blocked, right? The open door policy to that effect, where you can come in and share information or hear information. And a lot of people have been, there are people that had fear of public speaking,
right.
have been able to, there's a lot of growth that has come out of this, but I think we have unintentionally created a blueprint that, when something happens, and it could be on an actively trading scenario or whether it be in a scenario like this, right? But we've created a blueprint with not just how to coordinate and collaborate and make actionable tasks, but also how to do the media outreach, how to conduct congressional outreach. Everybody no matter how well versed you were in politics, everybody got a schooling on how politics really works, being involved here and putting boots on the ground, meeting with the offices, meeting with the staff. It has been a learning experience. I thought I knew it well, and I've gotten a full education personally out of that. So, but we could not have done it without Twitter, now X, and the spaces and information sharing. So
yeah, so it's interesting. So it's amazing, and but it has it's like life. It has its weaknesses, and you kind of have to navigate it. I know it's difficult for some people, and I appreciate that. And but without it, I think we would have been completely lost. Absolutely. And I think that is really the core to keeping the movement going. And kind of what you were saying is, I'm shocked. We're not the first, like AMC, GME, and everything. Literally, I said 551, whatever, under $1. Those are probably all candidates.
Yeah,
I'm surprised none of them have put a group together to go to DC, to walk the halls, because MMTLP is obviously my first. That's what I'm looking at, notwithstanding what everything else. But I would think, listen, the doors have been opened. Congress now they've learned. Right? This is not going to be a new concept to them. So if people from AMC or from Mullen go and say, we got naked shorting, the congressman will at least understand what the concept is. You're not going to have to educate them for 6 months. And I think it would be beneficial for everybody if the movement was huge, not just limited to us who have been directly impacted. And I don't think we'd get shortchanged by it. I think it just encourage us to get a faster solution. I hear, I don't know, you listen to Ham and William and those people, they're focusing on MMTLP. So it's not what they're in, but they believe MMTLP is the door to everything else. So I encourage everybody to take a stance, take a position, and make your presence known. And I know, by the way, there's some people who won't show their face, right?
Yeah.
And, it's various reasons. Because some people believe that they, like, Ham, for example, I've spoken to him several times. He's gotten plenty of death threats. So those kind of people don't want to expose their selves, their families. And, we're talking about literally billions of dollars. So would somebody do some ridiculous act over that amount of money? Probably.
Yeah.
It's happened before. So I think the caution is worthwhile. That's why, I've had Ham on my live stream a couple of times, and I didn't show his face. I respect that. And I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, but it is what it is. Before, we still haven't even gotten to the Nextbridge thing yet. Before we get to the Nextbridge, the last press release, and go through that kind of, so now you're an experienced, I don't know, you must be you're about 24 years old. So you've been trading since you're 18. So you've been trading 6 years, I think.
It's 24. Yeah.
So in all your time and now dealing with the stuff you're dealing with now, so do you have any suggestions yourself about how you would improve kind of the market conditions for retail traders?
Wow. That's a fantastic question. I obviously, massive overhaul is necessary from short sale restrictions. And I don't mean the existing SSR rules. I mean, in visibility, right? There's a strategy at hand in not just the misinformation and short and distort. Those things have existed for a long time, but just as an example, if you're an insider and you're purchasing shares, you have to file to disclose your position. There's institutional filings, obviously,
right,
that exist quarterly, not frequently enough, but quarterly, right? To at least see those positions. Same requirements aren't true of short positions, and forget mismarking them as long instead of short. Just pretend that we're all playing by the same rules here. It's honestly, I don't know how you could confidently, once the lights are on, I don't know how you could confidently be blind to it and be comfortable investing. So Finra, so I knew Finra had immunity and obviously an SRO, but I didn't realize the extent of their authority until kind of watching your arbitration play out, and obviously the litigation that's played out within the community. But it is appalling knowing that I don't think you have a regulator asleep at the wheel, because what's been uncovered is far more sinister than that. So what changes need to be put in place? I think, without being too brash, I think Finra likely needs some accountability and probably needs to be stripped of their immunity, right? Just as a start.
Yeah.
The SEC, I think needs an overhaul in some sense. They like to show their strength with literally media frenzy type headlines, the Kardashians, Elon Musk, but the real fraud that's taken place that everybody's subjected to, they completely turn a blind eye to. And whether you're of the opinion that they're incapable because it's so out of hand, or whether you're of the opinion that they're complicit and they're fully aware of it, and it's regulatory capture, and all these people are really just vying for their next job at the next big institution or hedge fund. It's literally sickening to watch and see play out. And I knew there was everybody knows that there's some certain element of it, but
right.
What we've all lived for the past 14 months is, I don't know if you watched the Showtime show Billions, which is about this space.
Yes.
The writers would probably say, this is too ridiculous of a story. Like, no, it's not believable. It's honestly like that. So massive overhaul in order to. Do
you think getting rid of, there's been a bunch of countries, China, India, South Korea, Thailand, we're taking on short selling and not naked short selling. We're just talking about short selling.
Yeah.
Do you think in this time, because I guess the purpose of short selling at some point in time, allegedly, was to provide liquidity for the market. Yeah. So I don't think liquidity is an issue anymore. Do you think there is a real reason to permit direct short selling? I know you can play games with options to kind of create synthetic shorts, but for direct shorting, do you think there's any reason to permit direct shorting?
I think if you want to go through that scrutiny, I think there are obviously valid reasons that you could short, right? If you don't want to completely remove the marketplace of inflow of cash when everybody knows, if you're headed towards a recession and everybody gets gun shy and they think that there's no opportunity to make money in the marketplace, there's more day traders now than have ever existed in time. So I do understand the opportunities, and I myself have made money.
Right, you mentioned it.
Stocks, but so my problem with it, literally within the Torchlight scenario, right? You had literally an organized social media group, an investor group that was using back channel communications to literally try to stir a social media frenzy, get people to buy stock, and then coordinating when they were going to dump it and the price targets and whatnot, leaving retail holding the bag. And, that is absolutely prosecuted as close to 100% as possible. The other side, when it's done professionally, whether it be done from institutions or whether it be done from these hedge funds, we turn a blind eye. And it's, that piece of it, I think the only way that, and actually Dr. Robert Shapiro said this, you have to let the market perform as a free market. And I think if you allow short squeezes to occur, and it's technically illegal to stage a scenario to try to manipulate it, but let it happen. Let some I hate using this metaphor, but let some bodies lay in the street as a deterrent for that kind of behavior. And we may see that as a potential outcome here, not through the regulators allowing it, but just through sheer blunt force of this relentless community.
I have problem with the companies like the biotechs and the medical companies that, require 3 trials. They require a lot of cash. They don't have any revenue, and they're kind of like targeted by shorts. So I understand your position, but I almost feel like it's immoral in a way that if you target medical advances and technological advances, I understand the financial benefits, but maybe like you can group some securities and make them exempt from shorting. Maybe like certain societal benefits you can protect. But I saw like Sava, so it's Cassava Sciences, and I'd watch it. It's an Alzheimer's drug.
Yeah.
And I'd watch it and I'd see the short and distort reports. I actually complained to the SEC about it because I knew it was BS.
Yeah.
But the problem with all those reports is once they're out, you're done.
Yeah.
You can refute it, but the damage is done, and there's no way to undo it. So I have a particular problem myself with certain types of companies, and I understand why people would want to short, but I would like to exclude for society's benefit maybe a class of companies. Would that be something that you could get on board with?
100% on board with that. Yeah.
Okay.
And that same approach has been taken several times, most recently around community banks, right? Regional banks. But in 2008 around some of the largest institutions within the United States. So they're not reluctant to do that when it touches their own pocketbook, right? So I'm absolutely on board with, we need a pause. We absolutely,
Yeah.
I think what is obviously revealing itself is we need a pause and we need to evaluate how people are manipulating things. I think we know very well exactly how it's happening from a mechanic standpoint, but there's no deterrent.
Yeah, it seems like it's completely out of control right now. It's like, and it seems like the regulators understand that too, and they might be just completely overwhelmed. Like, we're screwed. How do we deal with this? It's the kind of the argument, and you kind of mention it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's that matrix, blue pill, red pill, whatever. Once you see you can't unsee it. So for all of us, it's so obvious. That's what makes it frustrating too. When you see it and it's so obvious and somebody else doesn't. But so be it. Before we get into the Nextbridge, I've been holding a couple for you. I was saving a few before we get to the press release. This one might be a little bit. We'll see how this one goes. Why don't visually impaired people, how to use the correct language, go skydiving more often?
Hit it.
It scares the dog. What do you get if you cross a dog and a lion?
I don't know.
Well, you won't be getting your mail, that's for sure. And why do dogs like conjunctions?
Lay it on me.
They like butts. Okay.
I'm easily amused, I think.
Okay,
I laugh every time, every joke.
Anytime. My sister laughs at everything. My poker buddies groan at everything. So you did I saw you on a Spaces. You did a summary on the Nextbridge releases, the most recent releases. And prior to that, I think, and you can kind of summarize it, I think Finra put out another PR. Maybe it wasn't called an FAQ, but it was basically another supplemental FAQ. So from that one, what kind of caught your eye the most out of that from Finra?
Yeah, and I think Drew did a great point-by-point rebuttal to that letter. But to me, there were 2 sticking points that were so obvious. And I think maybe the 2 largest missteps that Finra has made to date, which is saying something because there have been many. One was, again, they are, I don't know, is it the 3rd, is it the 4th time that they're acknowledging the short position of what they have, of the self-reported shorts that are 2.65 million, right? But simultaneously, so they say that, and simultaneously are acknowledging that they have no purview, no ability to account for any of the offshore positions, which of course, part of the backstory, and John so eloquently explains this. That is the 101 mechanics of this, and avoiding short sale reporting to begin with, is to move those positions to an offshore affiliate. So that acknowledgement to me felt intentional, because it's such a blatant, again, this came from, signed by Robert Cook.
By the way, that was withheld, right, for 14 months, right? They could have said that day one.
Yeah.
Right. Go on. I'm sorry.
Instead, they're obfuscating and saying that you can't report, or you can't rely on the reporting tools, the reporting utilities that they offer as a straight gauge of what the short interest in open short positions are, which is all very comical, right? So I thought that was obviously a huge misstep, and it is under their purview, right, through the broker dealers that ultimately facilitated those transactions. It doesn't matter where they reside. The second one, and the one that I was personally most excited about, and there's some history behind this, and I'll share some of the history, but and going through the detailed explanation of this, but 6490 and FINRA Rule 6490 centers around FINRA's role in corporate action governance, and that one's of particular interest because FINRA has reiterated time and time again that their justification for the U3 halt was significant uncertainty in the settlement and clearance processes. That's what was in the official Uniform Practice Code advisory notice. That is what they've said and reiterated in the FAQs. They basically are sharing this narrative that they didn't want unsuspecting purchasers of MMTLP to not have underlying rights to Nextbridge hydrocarbons if they purchase after the 8th. So if
we do know that as of the 2nd, I think, or the 1st, that they were acknowledging that there were fraud allegations going around, and it was hitting the SEC's desk and whatever. So there wasn't reference to a settlement problem. There was a reference to a fraud issue before the U3 halt.
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
It's correct. Yeah, actually multiple instances. So one instance where Stephanie Dumont, so we had the FOIA release for anybody that is not extremely familiar with the scenarios surrounding MMTLP, but prior to the spin out, literally the week before, there's a Sunday evening email on Sunday, December 1st. And these are FOIA granted responses. So, there's partial redactions, but they're acknowledging MMTLP. It's the most damning of them is Sam Dratty, who is still the senior vice president of National Cause and Financial Crimes Detection Program, and that's the email that you were just alluding to,
right?
And
formerly a senior enforcement officer at the SEC.
At the SEC, yes. And he's acknowledging on the 5th, which is important from a context standpoint, because this is before the first corporate action has ever been published and approved. And there's a lot more details behind that, but they're acknowledging the potential of fraud on both issuers, right? So they're talking about MMAT and MMTLP at that point. It's safe to assume the allusion there, but so 6490 is interesting because they use it as an example and describe exactly what their authority is, what they don't do, and we did not know this in December of 2022, but the actual activities that were happening behind the scenes for initiating the corporate action request, and then the language that's crafted in the corporate action, and then subsequent changes that are made in the corporate action, we have far more knowledge on and in appropriate context. But to explain what FINRA is just reiterating, they're saying, if you were to purchase shares of MMTLP on the 9th or on the 12th, that you would not receive the shares because of T+2 settlement. You would not receive shares in time before the company is going to cancel the shares of MMTLP, and they would effectively be spun out into Nextbridge hydrocarbons. Wasn't going to be a
Correct,
problem.
by the way, and am I correct that the deletion language was inserted by Finra?
Correct. Yeah, that's on the 8th, on December 8th. But yeah, so that was their concern. Is basically I made the analogy of now we're right up on the cusp of the Super Bowl, so maybe it's relevant again. But I made the analogy that Finra took the position with that, and this was at the time where we did not know the details surrounding the corporate action and who actually authored the language, but they basically prioritized the attempted attendees of the potential attendees of the Super Bowl that would potentially buy scalper tickets outside of the venue. And they were worried that they wouldn't get to their seat in time, instead of prioritizing the 70,000 people that are in their seat and are waiting and are ready to watch the event ultimately unfold. So they prioritize, could the people that were buying scalper tickets not get what they think that they're buying?
And they had, as of that point in time, they also had blue sheeted, right? They had blue sheeted the brokers. So the brokers must have known what they provided to Finra. So if there was a problem, not only did Finra know no later than the 5th or 6th, but the brokers knew because they provided the information. At least that's the way I kind of saw it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, we picked this apart many times, but the blue sheeting process is not something that is a rare occurrence. This is something that's done inherently, just as part of, and it's a largely automated process to request, to receive. So anyway, there's a lot baked into that, but the thing that's very interesting from a development standpoint is, over the last year, as you had some of the insiders, whether they're previous Torchlight insiders like John Berta, obviously Greg McCabe is now chairman and CEO of Nextbridge Hydrocarbons. They're all central to this. They're obviously heavily interested in the outcomes and are privy to the information prior to the spin out, engaged with the spin out. It's interesting to know that this information kind of evolves over time, and Finra went outside of their self-described authority in Finra Rule 6490.
So I'm going to stop you there. Yeah. I'm going to stop you there. So we can have a little bit of a legal argument, because I know that's the position. So that's the issue of whether they have immunity too, right? So it's within the scope of their delegated responsibilities. So my position, I understand your position. Yes. My position would be that it was still within the scope of their responsibilities. They just did it improperly. So they would still be not that they're not responsible, not that they didn't act improperly, but I would still say the immunity would still apply, because it still was something they were supposed to do. They just did it wrong. But I'm going to let you argue your case.
Yeah. So I think I think that point is valid. Again, without appropriate context, and that's the beauty of using Finra's own representative that's responsible for part of the committee that issues the U3 halt and making that decision and evaluation. And his testimony in an SEC roundtable.
And who are you referring to specifically here?
Chris Stone, VP of Transparency Services at Finra.
Transparency Services.
Yes, it's not meant to be ironic, but it is. So, so I definitely get the argument. And we had a lot of people that came out of the woodwork to say, oh, well, there definitely would have been, like, you can do math, T+2. It would not have been settled in time. And so you would have people that could have purchased on paper, could have purchased MMTLP and it not settle in time. But that ignores the fact that the broker dealers, seeing this communication, seeing the publication to the daily list, came out immediately in response to the 6th, and really between the 6th, 7th, and 8th, and each made declarations that new purchase to open, new buys to open, new positions that would be open would be subsequently canceled because they knew the settlement issue that was going to proceed. But buy to close, to close out the borrows, to close out the short positions, those would certainly be open season.
Now those two corporate action notices, and if I read the rule correctly, FINRA is not supposed to draft the corporate action notices. They're supposed to review them and approve them. But my understanding, and secondhand, my understanding is the two on the one on the 6th and on the 8th, they drafted them.
They drafted them.
That to me sounds like a little bit of an unusual move.
Unusual, and that's the precarious part, right? Is if the company is issuing a corporate action. By the way, go back to December of 2022. The request for the corporate action started in late November. And actually, George Palikaris came out on Twitter publicly stating the language that was requested for the corporate action on November 30th. And we now know it took prodding from a U.S. congressman in order to get some kind of response out of Finra, because they were largely ghosting the issuer in any kind of response on initiating that initial corporate action. And they didn't actually get it published until December 6th. But what we
wonder, that's interesting, because and I've mentioned this before, and I don't mean, but do mean to keep on interrupting you, but I have a communication from Fidelity November 15th that says they can't be selling MMTLP shares. That's from the Ethics Compliance Department. And it may be because the corporate action wasn't approved as of that point in time. I don't know why, but it was clear they couldn't, even though they did. It was they stated they couldn't. So it's interesting to me. I
love that it came from the Ethics Department. That's the irony there.
Yeah.
So you have this scenario playing out, and what we now know was taking place. And Nextbridge confirmed this within their latest PR. So they confirmed that the language that was authored and drafted from within that corporate action, including the subsequent change of the dates, was all executed by Finra and without approval from they were told, worse than, I shouldn't even say not approval, they were told explicitly not to modify the language.
Right.
So intent is clear here, right?
And besides the rule, and I'm going to let you continue on, but I think if Finra could draft corporate action notices, I guess they could draft another corporate action notice if there was a problem. If they needed more time for settlement purposes, I guess they probably could draft a corporate action notice. I assume MMTLP would not object to that, and that would have resolved it. At least that's what I thought way back. I didn't know about 6490, by the way. I just thought, logically speaking, if they draft it, they could draft another one.
Yeah, and it, for whatever reason, it took, we can speculate what, I'm assuming my speculation, highly speculative explanation is they were obviously conjuring up this exact scenario of how best to ensure that there wasn't a huge run up in the share price, right? And the reason I justify that, well, one, 6490 has explicit language stating that they can process a corporate action as deficient if there's an open investigation, like a federal investigation, like, I don't know, an open SEC investigation.
Their own investigation.
Their own investigation. So they had standing, they had grounds to reject it in the first place, just on that merit. And
so let me stop you there. So that's one. But there's four. There's four opportunities. If they thought the documentation was not entirely accurate, that would have been the appropriate decision to do, to pull the corporate action notice, not to go forward.
Right.
If they have actual knowledge that there's an investigation against anybody connected to the issuer, not the issuer, but anybody connected to the issuer. And last but not least, if there is significant uncertainty in the settlement and clearance process for the security, that's number 5. I think that's kind of their position, isn't it?
That's literally it was like a checklist. They wanted to make sure that they had every reason to decline it and indicate that it was deficient, but wait, we'll craft the language and then it'll be good. Wink, wink. Right. So, yeah. So, intent appears to me, or anybody that's just hearing this for the first time, if you said someone drafts language that they then are going to say is unacceptable and causes significant uncertainty and settlement and clearance processes, I think that drafting party would probably be responsible for that.
Now, the recent time, there was also, I think recent time being yesterday, today, there was an organization, FIF, a financial, like a brokerage organization, and they held, I think, like 13 different meetings involving MMTLP issues. And I think in at least some of them I read, they suggested that there would be communication from them to regulators after they discuss certain issues. So, and that's during that dark, that during the time we don't have necessarily a lot of information about what's going on.
Exactly.
But it sounds like the regulators are being fed information directly from the brokers, including the brokers that are getting subpoenaed by Finra and the SEC.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think all that information in Nextbridge confirming that FINRA did indeed draft that language within the corporate action that they then used as their justification for the settlement issue that was going to occur. And then I think the most ironic of discoveries is going back to, how this thing listed in the first place. And normally the submission process involves a Form 211, which is really a financial, and it's an adequacy review, right? To make sure that potential investors have enough relevant information about what they're investing in before it's listed. And the assumption was that there was going to be a Form 211, and put together a thread. I did that one solo, honestly, just pissed off at the ombudsman, Jack Chase, just totally brushing us off consistently. And I went back and found testimony in this SEC hosted roundtable on combating retail investment fraud. Like it's just so ironic, the names of these things, but where Yvonne Huber describes the Form 211 process and exactly what they do in that review. And if you remember this time last year, so I released the thread on, I think, February 5th. And on February 6th, Cromwell Coulson, the OTC president, comes out and he's like, there's no Form 211. There's not. Right. And he's singing like a bird. Right. And I didn't know why at the time. And I look at the panel and, oh, look, Cromwell's in there. And he's talking all about all these things. And there's a Halt organized panel on there. And somebody revived this thread. Right. And when they did, I went back and looked at it, and I noticed the quote from Chris Stone regarding specifically not just halts, not like level up, level down volatility halts. He's talking about U3 extraordinary market event halts. And he uses, and I will read the language for anybody that hasn't heard it because it is so rich. But he says directly, it can be, and again, just so everyone knows where this quote is coming from, this is from Chris Stone, who in 2018 was the vice president in FINRA's Transparency Services Department. And he says in his quote, in his testimony, and you can watch this, there's a video that we've now archived along with the actual transcripts that I'm reading from, but he's responsible for the business units that run the fixed income products. And he is responsible, he's part of the team that is responsible for identifying potential OTC equity U3 extraordinary market halts. And so this panel is talking about what they do and their natural kind of order of operations for combating this. And this is the quote. This is so rich, but he says, it can be challenging to find in real time the valid information that we need to execute a U3 extraordinary market halt in this space. That said, we have a range of exchange-like tools that we use in the space. Yvonne spoke, talking about Yvonne Huber, Yvonne spoke at length earlier about our 211 qualification process, which we know was circumvented by market maker exemption to get MMTLP listed, but just important context. So he said, Yvonne spoke at length earlier about our 211 qualification process. We also have a rule 6490, which has allowed us to declare certain corporate actions deficient and not process them if we believe they're related to market fraud or would otherwise threaten the clearance at settlement system. And then obviously, lastly, a 6440, our halt provision. So rich because he literally lays out, this is what we do to prevent fraud in the sense of preventing a ticker from reaching the marketplace, right? This is the vetting that we do before allowing an equity to hit the marketplace. And then corporate actions, we review and we indicate that they're deficient if it's going to be, if it has the potential of being related to fraud or causes issues in the settlement or clearance processes. Well, that was literally the reason that they gave for the U3 halt, right? And we know literally the day before, on December 5th, 2022, Sam Dratty is talking about it hitting the fraud radar and blue sheeting. So both of those, it doesn't matter which angle they want to take. Both of those were in play with 6490, and they didn't issue one corporate action. They issued two on December 6th and December 8th, and it was their language. So anyway, intent.
Well, you know, it'd be interesting. And I hadn't thought about this. How many, maybe it won't be interesting. How many U3 halts were there issued between that conference and the U3 halt issued in MMTLP? More than one?
Oh yeah, definitely more than one. There's actually many. And we actually went through and aggregated that data as part of initial discovery. And I think it's still reportable. I don't know if we can go all the way back to 2018, but it's still reportable on, well, it's reportable as of now. As soon as, you know, Finra's working behind the scenes, I'm sure to eliminate those archived years.
You're referring to, is that any halt or just a U3 halt?
U3 halt. Okay. The other halts are also available. You can,
right.
Yeah, you can filter out, but yes.
But it seems like, you know, that it was specifically set up that the appropriate remedy here would be to either cancel the corporate action, or more likely just prepare a new corporate action that deals with whatever the shortcoming is of the other one. And remember the fact that there was the OTC vice president who kind of
Jeff Mendel.
Yeah, he kind of front run the deletion language change on the 6th. I think it was on the 6th. That came on the 8th. Sounded like he had already been put in. He was part of the team already and kind of knew the play as of that point.
Perfect segue, because we were talking about Cromwell. Love the segue, because one of the other questions was, it became apparent. So we know Finra drafted the language. Obviously, everyone knows it was U3 halted on December 9th, but Cromwell Coulson has a really rich quote in here, because one of the questions became, okay, it looks like obviously Finra's stance is no, there's nobody that was privy to what was going to occur with the U3 halt. And we don't, you know, as a normal retail investor, nobody's privy to how those decisions are made, right? Or we all got a forced education with how those decisions are made. And the question's been asked by John Berta, and it was initially asked to Yvonne Huber, you know, what market makers, what institutions, what hedge funds were made aware that there was going to be a U3 halt? Because if you look at the trading activity, and obviously an overwhelming majority of it was short on the last day of trading,
right?
Somebody knew something, right? Like they obviously knew. So there's coordinated corruption there, but the stance has been, no, there's nobody that was given that information or provided it ahead of time. However, again, same panel, all this information packed into one panel. Cromwell Coulson says, and again, this is in the relevant discussion around U3 halts. So he says, so where we see in this role is, you know, we think we can provide a very good side of feeding information in as part of it, who's going to the SEC, who's going to Finra. When Finra has done a halt, ourselves and the market makers have been very much in the conversation.
Yeah, so they're acknowledging they're not in the dark. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know this. So they do some kind of information sharing here. That's interesting.
Well, not only that, you remember, because but the brokers would have known too, again, because of the blue sheeting. They would have that information would have been exchanged and well known amongst all those people, the hedge funds, brokers, the regulators, OTCs. I mean, everybody would have known except retail.
Correct.
And retail, you know, I remember it was not confusing. I remember what was going to happen was not confusing. I had no doubts. I didn't know, like, I have to be honest, in light of the way the market worked, I thought, how are these guys going to try to screw us? I honestly had that thought.
Yeah.
I never thought this, and I'm sure they didn't think that they would have to, that this would still be around 14 months later.
Right.
I'm sure they figured, it would go away. People will give up and move on. Part of kind of the flip side of that was, and it's in the response by Nextbridge. And by the way, I thought that letter was brilliantly written. And I know, but by Nextbridge, the press release that was done on the 8th, I thought it was really artfully written. And I was able to ascertain that it was written by different people. So I thought it was really, it was understated and really pointed in the same way. And I really liked it. I really liked the way it was drafted. But part of it, the thing that struck with me, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, was the admission that they don't know the share count.
Yes.
And that they don't control what happens outside the borders. That's not even talking about, we talked about this. Goldman admits they marked, millions long that should have been marked short. And what impact does that have on the marketplace?
Right.
Even if they get fined, the parties that are injured don't get any remedy. If I bought stock that Goldman improperly marked and that impacted the valuation, I don't get a remedy for that.
Correct.
And in fact, I think anytime the SEC or FINRA fines any of these institutions for engaging in activities like that, it should be disclosed what the securities are. So if people have been harmed, they have an opportunity to get, to be made whole. I think that's only reasonable. And those entities have a lot of money. So they probably should be able to take care of it, or they should be changing their practices. But the point about not being able to understand the share count, kind of what we were talking about, is, so I had no idea about that. I really had no idea that they had no idea what the share count is, what the value of the stock is, what the amount of dilution is. And, what I was saying and what we were talking about is, why not put a warning label on any statement that comes from your broker indicating those particular things? And obviously, I think the brokerage industry would be opposed to that, my guess, but it might encourage them to maybe reform some of their practices so that they could avoid that. And obviously, I think, and I've been a big proponent about that, is a subpoena should issue, and that admission by FINRA that they really have no idea, that should be enough. That should be enough. And that's not pointing the fingers at FINRA that they did anything wrong. That's just an information issue. If they acknowledge they have no idea what the share count is, then we need to find that out, because as shareholders, we don't have what we think we have. And I think they've admitted that.
Yeah.
Anything to add on that?
I think it was intentional. It's hard to believe that they would include that language with that not being well thought out as to what the response would be to that. So I don't know what to read into that. But yeah, I 100% agree.
Now, I know Congress is, evaluating whether they should issue a subpoena. And, from a legal standpoint, if I want to get a subpoena issued, it takes me 5 seconds, literally. I punch a button. I have a subpoena. It's gone. So for the Congress people, it's tough, and they need a lot of justification. But I thought that was kind of like put it over the top, because, again, it's not an issue of right or wrong. It's an issue of we don't know. And I think if nothing else, Congress should obtain the information to develop a level of certainty what share count is. And if they don't know, but listen, this is every ticker, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about MMTLP, but it goes to every ticker. It's a massive problem, and it's got to be dealt with, because if it's not dealt with, we know what's going to happen at some point in time, right? At some point in time, the system will collapse.
Absolutely.
It's not, it's not a question of if, it's when. And I realize, maybe I don't realize, maybe, we see, probably it is true. We see the problem and it keeps on coming out like piece by piece. So maybe like the problem that really exists is so far beyond what we even see that it's just too frightening for Cook and Gensler to deal with. But otherwise, if it's not dealt with, it'll end badly. It's bad for us enough, but it's really time. And again, I appreciate everybody who's gone to DC. I appreciate Don, Rich, same guy. Maybe he's I don't know, split personality, maybe. I appreciate everything he's done, but to the Congress, if anybody's listening, now's the time. Because if you don't do it now, election's going to come. We won't get it till my view. So at some point in time this year, everybody's going to be involved in electioneering. This won't be the first thing on their mind, and it'll kick it over till probably January of 2025 when the new House comes in, and that's not right, and that's not what this community deserves. So, as much as I appreciate every congressperson or senator that has taken time and interest, now's the time. Shit or get off the pot, really. It's really. And again, it's much appreciated, but you got to do one more thing for us. And I think, the funny part is whoever is brave enough in Congress to do this is going to be a hero. Absolutely. And will go down in history as doing remarkable work. So whoever that brave person is, please step forward and get it done. I don't know how you feel about the subpoena and all that stuff.
I totally agree. I cannot agree more. You look at, and now we're dealing with the aftermath of the shortcomings of it, but look at Dodd-Frank and what came out of 2008, right? Where there was obviously a need of change. It obviously was not was also simultaneously not fully resolved, massive loopholes left in place, but it takes somebody to champion it, right? But the people that do go down in history, and this is one that there's so few issues today that are not partisan, right? That are truly bipartisan issues, and this is one that hurts everyone equally, unfortunately, right? Depending on the type of companies and investments that you have, everyone is vulnerable, and the United States is vulnerable. The financial markets are vulnerable. So, and it doesn't even have to be, one of the brilliant points that I think the Congressional Outreach Group is what I'm calling, but everyone knows them as the dynamic of handful of people that have put kind of boots on the ground, walking the halls of DC, and looking at this from a different angle, that it doesn't have to be just pointing the finger at the hedge funds that are obviously nefarious and they're performing illegal tactics, but this is an international issue. It is truly international. And so to do nothing about it is literally leaving us vulnerable. And every other major country with a marketplace has taken steps in order to mitigate this. And for it to not be acknowledged, because that is one of the first steps, is just acknowledging the problem. They're still obfuscating and kind of poking fun in the last supplemental response. Like, we're not really sure what counterfeit shorts mean. But Harvey Pitt, the former SEC chair, is one of the most prominent individuals that was coining the phrase. So to be coy like that is really just thumbing their nose at us. But it hopefully the time of cleaning it up is not after another financial crisis, right? Because we can't afford it.
I expect, and there's a lot of bravery in this community. I expect the government to at least match that. And to this point in time, they haven't. So now's the time. A lot of people are really hurting, are in financial disarray. And, listen, there's concern about the economy in general. If the economy goes south, all those people that are hurting financially are going to be in worse position. So again, all I can ask is for whoever out there, be brave, stand up, issue a subpoena. And I really believe the issuance of a subpoena will resolve this matter, because I think the risk of the information and documentation coming out will be enough to encourage Finra to move forward. And I believe, more than believe, I think they have maybe started to think they need to reach out to the parties involved, even if their position publicly is different. So again, we need the extra little push from Congress, and I'm asking for their help. Anything else that you wanted to add or say? I've taken a lot of your time. I appreciated your time. I always learn, and I'm sure people here too. I learn a lot, really. It helps me to get a good grasp of the facts. So I appreciate you kind of laying it down. Anything else you wanted to add?
I will say there's evidence of your thought that there might have been some outreach that was discovered in what you just previously alluded to, the FIF, the Financial Information Forum, affirms there was a memo posted publicly, I believe it was January 22nd was the date, about an FIF member requesting, and they're really, it's all private. It's listed out, confidentiality, anonymity would be kept in it. But yeah, that appears to be what that appears to be evidence of exactly what you just described. But
yeah, when I saw that reference and it was only one, it appeared it was only one broker dealer, I assume it's TradeStation. That was kind of who I thought, because that would be an easy one because it was public. I don't know, by the way, I don't know, but I just thought that was what occurred to me. But be that as it may, who knows what it was? But we need a resolution, and we need a resolution now. Again, I'll give you the last word.
Well, thank you for all the time, Richard, and thank you for doing this regularly. You always cover a diversity of topics, and you always have fantastic guests too. So, and I've gotten to know a lot of people over the last 14 months, right? That I've honestly made. We didn't talk about this as much earlier, right, with the group dynamics, but I've made out of this, the silver lining is I've made some lifelong friends out of this, and some professional connections out of this, and just resources, right? This is the most professional or most expensive networking event I've ever participated in my life. But it's there's a lot of forced education and forced learning. So I really want to commend the community for sticking it out. And we've obviously achieved a tremendous amount of momentum. I will ask that everybody sets personal vendettas and drama aside and focus at the task at hand, and trying to give what you just advocated for, the last congressional push to ultimately issue subpoenas, and if necessary, a public hearing if it has to get to that point.
Yeah. And we're going to be there. I mean, I know you are, and I am. We're going to be there till it's done. So I think that's something that they didn't expect, and they are stuck with that, and we're not leaving. And to everybody out there who watched or who will watch in the future, thank you. If you have questions or comments, I will look at them and I'll try to answer the question. Maybe not as well as Kurtis, but I'll do my best if I can. I really enjoyed having Kurtis here. As things progress down the road, I'd like to have you back. We can kind of talk about where things go. And again, I wanted to thank you for putting some time aside. Enjoy the Super Bowl out tomorrow. And to everybody out there, enjoy the Super Bowl. Be well. Keep on pushing. We just have to keep on pushing. We will get to the end. And again, everybody have a great weekend. Be well. Take care of yourselves. And again, thanks for watching. And again, thanks, Kurtis, for taking care.